Folks, we really have a president who has shown he does not read, who is utterly clueless about American history. Yes, I mean, can you imagine having Cliff Notes in the White House to explain the Civil War and what actually happened? He was talking to Salena Zito with the Washington Examiner, and this is what he said to her about former President Andrew Jackson and the Civil War, even though Jackson died 16 years prior to the Civil War.
Had Andrew Jackson been a little bit later, you wouldn't have had the Civil War. He was a very tough person, but he had a big heart, and he was really angry that he saw what was happening with regard to the Civil War. He said, there's no reason for this.
He then said this.
People don't realize, you know, the Civil War, you think about it, why? People don't ask that question. But why was there the Civil War? Why could that one not have been worked out?
What the? People don't ask why. Do you know how many books and movies have been written dealing with why? Are you serious? If anybody is confused as to why this president is confused, these comments right here speak to it. Now, realizing he screwed up, what did he do? Go to Twitter. This is what he posted. Our President Andrew Jackson, who died 16 years before the Civil War started, saw it coming and was angry, would never have let it happen, end quote. Show me the evidence where he saw it was coming. Okay, so, but hold tight 1 second. Joining me on the phone from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, is, of course, Gerald Horne, historian, chair of history and African American studies at the University of Houston. Gerald, he also is the author of the book, The Counter-Revolution of 1776, Slave Resistance and the Origins of the United States of America. Gerald, I would hope you would send an autographed copy to Trump, or at least send the audio version because he's clueless. Here's the thing, here's why this matters as far as I'm concerned, Gerald. It's because a person's understanding of history informs their knowledge today and informs their policies. He is grossly uninformed.
Well, you're obviously correct, and I think that there are real-world consequences to Mr. Trump's ignorance. On the one hand, we can laugh at him and see him as a buffoon and a clown, which is entirely appropriate. But on the other hand, we should take what he says quite seriously because it reflects a kind of denialism. A denial of the import and impact of slavery in terms of the root cause of the Civil War and the reluctance of slaveholders and slave traders like his hero, Andrew Jackson, to relinquish the billions of dollars in property that they held in African bodies. And that led directly to the Civil War. As you know, there's this fake news out there that suggests that the Civil War was all about states' rights or was all about tariffs imposed by Washington. And if you take that point of view, it inevitably leads to Mr. Trump's wrong-headed conclusion, which is, why didn't they just file a lawsuit? But, of course, the Civil War was not simply about states' rights or tariffs. It was about slavery, which necessitated this kind of bloodletting that led to the freedom for our ancestors. This has real-world consequences because, as you know more than most, there are many Republicans who feel that people like themselves suffer more discrimination, believe it or not, than Black Americans suffer. This has real-world consequences because it prevents us from connecting the dots. That is to say, the fact that just a few days ago in New Orleans, there was almost a riot when there was an attempt to take down these monuments to Confederate States of America heroes. Keep in mind that just a few days ago, the Baltimore Orioles outfielder, Adam Jones, suffered racist abuse when playing in Fenway Park in Boston against the Red Sox. Because of this slavery denialism, it hampers and prevents us from understanding contemporary racism And that is the important impact of Mr. Trump's wrong-headed remarks.
Spencer.
So just building on Professor Horn's point, Andrew Jackson was a slaveholder. If he were going to avoid the Civil War, you know, I'd be out there picking cotton right now. You know, I mean, his avoiding the Civil War would mean expanding slavery to Andrew Jackson.
Precisely.
And this is one of the...
And President Lincoln opposed the expansion of slavery. He initially was fine with slavery, but opposed the expansion.
Well, that's why Gerald's point is so important. You know, the question to ask Trump is not whether or not you know about the Civil War. Not only that, it is how much slavery would be acceptable to you.
Right.
And when Gerald writes about back what Antonio was talking about earlier, this black-brown unity, part of the reason there's a Texas is because slavery was outlawed in Mexico, and there was black-brown unity. Andrew Jackson was all about expanding the slave market, not constricting it.
So the reason this thing is interesting is because when you begin to analyze this here, Trump loves the populism of Andrew Jackson, but ignores the rest. Trump loves 1950s America for white folks, ignores the rest. And this is why this matters, because when he sees Jackson as his hero, he ignores what Jackson did with Native Americans. He ignores the issue of owning slaves. He ignores all of that, but no, I'm just gonna isolate this populism part.
I mean, you know, if you roll back the entire interview, well, first of all, I like to say, if you read the Washington Post, if you read the New York Times, both of their pieces that covered this began with the statement, I think we're making too much of this. So two major liberal newspapers actually opened that, and I agree with that.
So let me be real clear, I don't give a damn about the Washington Post and the New York Times.
I think we're making too much of it.
No. Here's why I don't care, because they also have had their whole issues with race. Both of them have had lawsuits filed against them in the last 30 years on the issue of race, and so I'm sure they probably will say that. So I don't care. I don't care what a largely white liberal institution.
Race, though.
What?
That's where I don't. If you roll back the entire interview, first of all, to say that he doesn't understand the history of the period, he talked about the election in which Andrew Jackson won. He was correct.
The man thought Andrew Jackson was alive during the Civil War, like he thought Frederick Douglass is at Starbucks right now.
No, he did not. What he was referring to, if you take the full personality of Donald Trump, was that he appreciates Andrew Jackson for a certain personality.
I agree.
No,
okay.
But Sue, you just proved my point, Sue. You just proved it. He likes
negotiator, as an outspoken
as a white
leader.
But Sue, here's my problem. He likes this narrowly defined view of Jackson as if the other stuff, Jose, is irrelevant.
Let me just say, by the way, I'm actually thankful for this.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for it because I think for so long we have lived on a lot of delusions and lies just to make people feel comfortable. And I think, you know, my colleague Ryan Eller actually says that what we're doing right now is we're finally telling America's full story.
Yes.
Right? Like even on immigration, when people say, oh, America was founded and built on immigrants, when you say that statement, you leave out two core groups of people, Native Americans and Black Americans, who were forcibly moved to come to this country, right? So I think what Trump is actually doing is forcing us to examine just how unfulfilled and lack of context in which we talk about American history.
Greg, and final comment, Gerald.
Well, I was going to say, you know, Cinco de Mayo is tomorrow. Part of the reason there's Cinco de Mayo is because the Mexicans beat up a European power and they outlawed slavery. This thing about immigrants...
Cinco de Mayo is Friday. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Cinco de Mayo. Thank you. But the only point I was going to try to make is that, you know, this question of being an immigrant is all oriented around whiteness. In other words, white people come here and then declare everybody else illegal. And Donald Trump is just tapping into that zeitgeist, that ethos.
Gerald Horn, 30 seconds, final comment.
Well, this conversation is right on, and it illustrates what your previous guest said about that there is no infrastructure in the mainstream media other than this program and perhaps a few others to discuss these questions, these probing questions of slavery denialism, which leads to a whitewashing of U.S. history and then subsequently a downplaying of the terror and misery suffered in particular by Black Americans.
Gerald Horn, University of Houston, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Jose, Spencer, Sue, Greg, thank you very much. A peaceful protest turned deadly. 37-year-old Black man was shot and killed by Baton Rouge police. His hands are in the air
and you still get shot by the cops.
Oh my God, please don't tell me he's dead.
We're not gonna let hate define us.
Race is a big part of this.
If truly all lives matter, then all lives need to matter equally. What we require is action. What we require is accountability. We understand that black lives do matter, and we will keep focused on this issue.
NewsOne Now, every weekday morning at 7 on TV1.